The desert wind carried dust across the narrow road like whispers of forgotten prayers. Out here, where the asphalt shimmered under the relentless sun and the only sounds were the hum of distant engines and the occasional cry of a hawk, the checkpoint stood like a judge's bench, silent, unmovable, final. Sergeant Marcus Webb had been stationed at Checkpoint 7 for 3 years. 3 years of scanning IDs, checking vehicle permits, waving through military convoys and civilian trucks hauling supplies to the base 20 miles north. 3 years of the same routine, the same heat, the same unforgiving sameness that turned men hard and women quiet. He stood now in his sand-colored uniform, aviator sunglasses reflecting the bleached horizon, one hand resting on his belt, the other holding a clipboard. Behind him, the American flag snapped in the wind, and the steel gate gleamed like a blade. Most people who came through here knew the drill. They had their papers ready, their answers rehearsed, their faces blank. But every now and then, someone would test him. Someone would ask questions, make excuses, show up unprepared. And Marcus had learned long ago that mercy was a luxury you couldn't afford when you were responsible for security. That's when he saw her. A small sedan, older model, dented along the passenger side, rolled slowly toward the checkpoint. The engine coughed as it idled. Through the windshield he could see her, a black woman, maybe in her late 40s, wearing a faded denim jacket and a tired expression that spoke of long roads and longer days. Marcus stepped forward, raising one hand. The car stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Her name was Olivia Grant, though no one at the checkpoint would ask. She'd been driving since dawn, her hands gripping the wheel with the kind of steady determination that came from years of holding things together when they wanted to fall apart. The backseat of her car was filled with cardboard boxes, clothes, canned goods, blankets, donations for the church outreach program on the other side of the valley. She'd promised Reverend Hayes she'd get them there by noon, and she wasn't one to break promises. But now, staring at the checkpoint ahead, she felt her chest tighten. She'd driven this route before, months ago, and it had been fine. A quick stop, a polite nod, a wave through. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was the stillness in the air. Maybe it was the way the sergeant stood there, arms crossed, eyes hidden behind those sunglasses. Olivia rolled down her window as he approached. "Good morning, ma'am." His voice was clipped, professional, license and vehicle registration. She reached into the glove compartment, her movements slow and careful. "Morning, officer, here you go." He took the documents without looking at her, scanning them with the same detached efficiency he'd shown 1,000 times before. Olivia waited, hands folded in her lap, trying to ignore the heat creeping through the open window. Marcus glanced at the registration, then at the car, then back at her. "This vehicle's overdue for inspection." Olivia blinked. I didn't know, I just had it checked 2 months ago." State requires it every 6 months for vehicles crossing into restricted zones. He tapped the clipboard. "You're 3 weeks overdue." Her heart sank. "I wasn't aware of that rule. I'm just delivering supplies to a church. It's not far." "Doesn't matter where you're going, ma'am. Rules are rules." She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like the dust outside. "What do I need to do?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he said the words that would change everything. "There's a fine for violating checkpoint protocols. $5,000. Olivia's breath caught. $5,000. "That's correct." Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them still in her lap. $5,000. She didn't have 500. Not after the medical bills, not after her daughter's school fees, not after everything. But she didn't say that, not yet. She just sat there silent, while the wind carried dust across the road and the sergeant waited for her answer. And in that silence, something unspoken began to stir, something neither of them could name, but both would soon feel. Marcus watched her face carefully. He'd seen this look before: shock, disbelief, the slow crumbling of composure. Most people argued. Some cried. Others tried to negotiate, bargain, promise they'd pay later. But Olivia just sat there, her dark eyes steady, her lips pressed together in a thin line. "Ma'am," he said, his tone softening just slightly, "I don't make the rules, I just enforce them." She nodded. "I understand. Do you have the means to pay the fine?" Olivia looked down at her hands. Her wedding ring, thin gold, worn smooth, caught the light. She'd pawned it once before, 2 years ago, when her husband got sick. She'd gotten it back 6 months later, but only barely. "No," she said quietly, "I don't." Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable now. "Then I can't let you through." "What if I turn back?" she asked, her voice calm, measured. "Go home and come back another day." "You'll still owe the fine. You violated the protocol the moment you entered the restricted zone." Olivia closed her eyes briefly, and for just a second Marcus saw something flicker across her face. Not anger, not desperation, but something deeper. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance. "Is there anyone you can call?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. She shook her head. No one who could help with that kind of money. He should have just written the citation, turned her around, sent her back the way she came. That's what protocol said. That's what he'd done dozens of times before. But something about her stillness unsettled him. "Look," he said, leaning down slightly, "I'm giving you a break here. Normally, we'd impound the vehicle too, but if you leave now, you'll just have the fine. And if I can't pay, then it goes to collections, eventually a warrant." Olivia nodded slowly. She understood how the system worked. She'd been crushed by it before. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. Marcus hesitated. "Go ahead." "Do you believe this is fair?" The question landed like a stone in still water. He straightened, his jaw tightening again. "Fair doesn't matter. The rule exists for a reason." "What reason?" "Security." "Security," she repeated, almost to herself. Then she looked up at him, and for the first time he saw the full weight of her weariness. "I'm just trying to help people, Sergeant, that's all." He didn't respond. "I have blankets in the back," she continued, her voice steady. "Canned food, clothes for kids who don't have winter jackets. That's what I'm carrying. That's what I'm trying to deliver." Marcus glanced at the backseat, saw the boxes, the neatly folded fabric. "Doesn't change the violation," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right, it doesn't." She reached for the keys. And in that moment, as her hand touched the ignition, something inside Marcus shifted, just barely, just enough to make him pause. "Wait," he said. She looked up. He didn't know why he said it, didn't know what he was about to do, but the word had left his mouth, and now he had to follow it somewhere. The wind picked up, scattering dust across the hood of her car, and the checkpoint seemed suddenly smaller, lonelier, more fragile than it ever had before. Olivia's hand hovered over the keys, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what wait meant, didn't know if it was mercy or just another delay before the hammer fell. Marcus stepped back, pulling off his sunglasses. His eyes, gray, tired, met hers for the first time without a barrier. "How far is this church?" he asked. "About 40 miles, she said carefully. He looked past her, toward the horizon, then back at the car. "And you're delivering all this yourself?" "Yes, sir. No one else could do it." She hesitated. "They asked me, and I said yes." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that seemed almost human, almost vulnerable. "You know what happens if I let you through without the fine being paid? You get in trouble." "More than trouble," he said. "I get written up, maybe suspended, maybe worse." Olivia nodded. "Then don't let me through." He stared at her, caught off guard. "What?" "I'm not asking you to break the rules for me," she said quietly. I wouldn't want that on your conscience." For a moment, Marcus didn't know what to say. Most people would have begged, would have tried to manipulate, guilt trip, make him feel responsible for their situation. But she wasn't doing that. She was giving him an out. "I'll turn around," Olivia continued, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "I'll go home. I'll figure something out." "And the fine?" She smiled sadly. "I'll figure that out too, somehow." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't expected to see. Dignity, grace, the kind of strength that didn't shout or demand but simply endured. It reminded him of someone. His mother. The thought came unbidden, sharp and painful. His mother, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep him and his sister fed after their father left. His mother, who'd driven an old car just like this one, who'd carried donations to shelters, who'd never once asked for help even when she needed it most. He pushed the thought away, but it lingered. "You really don't have anyone?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "I have my daughter," Olivia said, "but she's in college. I'm not going to ask her to drop out and pay a fine for something I did." "What about family, friends?" She shook her head. "Everyone's struggling, Sergeant. That's just how it is." Marcus looked down at the clipboard in his hands. The citation form was already half filled out. All he had to do was finish it, hand it to her, send her on her way. But his hand wouldn't move. "Why are you doing this?" he asked suddenly. Olivia blinked. "Doing what?" "Delivering supplies, driving out here, putting yourself at risk." She thought about it for a moment, then smiled, a small, genuine smile that seemed to soften the harsh light around them. "Because somebody has to," she said simply, "and because I can." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus turned away, staring at the checkpoint gate, the flag snapping in the wind, the empty road stretching endlessly in both directions. He thought about rules, about fairness, about the distance between what was legal and what was right. And for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't sure which side he was standing on. Marcus stood there for what felt like an eternity, the clipboard heavy in his hands. Behind him, he heard the crackle of the radio, another vehicle approaching from the south, maybe 10 minutes out. He had to make a decision. "Step out of the vehicle," he said finally. Olivia's heart sank. This was it. He was going to search the car, maybe impound it, maybe arrest her. She'd heard stories about checkpoints like this, about people who'd been detained for hours over nothing. But she didn't argue. She opened the door and stepped out, her legs stiff from the long drive. Marcus walked to the back of the car, opened the trunk. She did. Inside were more boxes, carefully packed, labeled in neat handwriting. Children's clothes, sizes 410, canned vegetables, blankets clean. He stared at them for a long moment, then closed the trunk. "Get back in the car," he said. Olivia obeyed, confused now. Marcus walked back to the driver's side window, leaned down, and handed her back her license and registration. "Go," he said quietly. She stared at him. "What?" "Go before I change my mind." "But the fine." "I'll handle it." Olivia's eyes widened. "You can't do that. You said you'd get in trouble." "I'll figure it out." He glanced toward the road. "You've got about 9 minutes before the next patrol comes through. I suggest you use them." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus looked at her, and for the first time his face softened completely. "Because somebody has to," he said, echoing her words. "And because I can." Olivia's breath caught. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, then stepped back. "Drive safe, ma'am." She started the engine, her hands shaking now, not from fear but from something else, something she couldn't quite name. As she pulled forward, past the checkpoint, past the gate, she looked in the rearview mirror and saw him standing there, watching her go, his figure growing smaller and smaller until the dust swallowed him whole. Olivia made it to the church by noon, just as she'd promised. Reverend Hayes and a handful of volunteers helped her unload the boxes, their faces bright with gratitude. "Bless you, Olivia," the Reverend said, clasping her hands. "These families are going to be so grateful." She smiled, but her mind was elsewhere, back at the checkpoint, back with the sergeant who'd let her go when he didn't have to. "Reverend," she said slowly, "do you know anything about the checkpoint on Route 40? He frowned. "The military one." "Yes. I know it's been there for years. Why?" She hesitated, then told him what had happened. The fine, the sergeant, the mercy. Reverend Hayes listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Sounds like you met someone carrying a heavy burden," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "Men like that, men in uniform, enforcing rules they didn't make. They carry weight most of us don't see. Sometimes, showing them kindness is the bravest thing you can do." Olivia thought about that, about the way the sergeant had looked at her, about the crack in his voice when he told her to go. "I want to do something for him," she said. "Like what?" She didn't know yet, but the idea took root in her heart, and by the time she drove home that evening, it had grown into something clear. 3 days later, Olivia returned to Checkpoint 7. She wasn't carrying donations this time. She was carrying a small box, wrapped simply, with a handwritten note tucked inside. Marcus saw her car approaching and felt his stomach tighten. He'd spent the last 3 days expecting a call from his superior, a reprimand, maybe worse. He'd falsified the report, marked her vehicle as cleared through administrative override, a lie that could cost him everything. But no call had come. And now here she was again. He stepped forward as she rolled down her window. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "you're not supposed to be here." "I know," Olivia said. "I just wanted to give you this." She handed him the box. Marcus stared at it. "What is it?" "Open it later," she said, "when you're alone." He wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her this wasn't necessary, but something in her eyes stopped him. "Thank you," he said quietly. She smiled. "No, thank you." And then she was gone, her car disappearing down the road the same way it had come. That night, Marcus sat alone in his quarters on the base, the small box resting on the table in front of him. He'd been staring at it for almost an hour, afraid of what might be inside. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small, worn Bible, the kind with soft leather binding and pages edged in gold. He unfolded the note first. "Sergeant Webb, I don't know your story, but I know this. Kindness is never wasted. You didn't have to help me, but you did. And because of that, 23 children will have warm clothes this winter. 12 families will have food. People who were forgotten will know they're not alone. You did that. I'm praying for you. Not because I think you need saving, but because I think you're already doing the work of someone who cares deeply about what's right." This Bible belonged to my husband. He passed 2 years ago, but he always said that the strongest people aren't the ones who never break. They're the ones who choose kindness even when it's hard. I think he would have liked you. Olivia Grant. Marcus read the note 3 times, his throat tight. Then he picked up the Bible, opened it to a random page, and saw a verse highlighted in faded yellow. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." He closed the book, set it down gently, and for the first time in 3 years Marcus Webb allowed himself to cry. Not because he was sad, but because he'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, not as a uniform, not as a rule enforcer, but as a human being capable of grace. 2 weeks later, Marcus requested a transfer. His commanding officer was surprised. Marcus had been a model soldier, consistent, reliable, never caused trouble. But Marcus had made up his mind. "I need a change," he told the officer. I need to be somewhere I can do more than just enforce rules. The transfer went through. A month later, Marcus found himself stationed at a veteran outreach center in the city, helping former soldiers transition back to civilian life. It wasn't combat, it wasn't glory, but it was meaningful. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. He kept Olivia's Bible on his desk, and sometimes, when the days were hard, he'd open it and read the verses her husband had highlighted. He never saw Olivia again, but he thought about her often, about her silence, her dignity, her refusal to beg or break. And he understood, finally, what she'd taught him without ever saying it aloud. That mercy wasn't weakness. That kindness wasn't foolishness. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone go. Months later, on a cold evening, Marcus sat in the outreach center's common room, listening to a veteran named David talk about his struggles finding work after leaving the service. "I just feel like nobody sees me anymore," David said quietly, "like I'm invisible." Marcus looked at him and thought of Olivia, of the way she'd sat in her car, silent and steady, refusing to become bitter even when the world was unfair. "I see you," Marcus said, "and I'm going to help you because somebody has to." David looked up, surprised. "And because I can," Marcus added, smiling slightly. The words felt right, felt true. Later that night, Marcus walked outside, the city lights glowing softly in the distance. He thought about checkpoints and fines, about rules and mercy, about the woman who'd changed his life without ever knowing it. And he realized something profound: that we are all standing at checkpoints of our own making, places where we decide whether to enforce the letter of the law or listen to the whisper of grace. That the world is full of Olivias, people carrying quiet burdens, doing good without recognition, showing strength without shouting. And that the truest measure of a person isn't found in the power they wield, but in the mercy they choose to give. Somewhere out on a desert road, the wind still carries dust across the asphalt. But at checkpoint 7, where a sergeant once stood rigid and unyielding, there is now a memory, a testament to the truth that silence, when spoken with dignity, can be louder than any order ever given.